It's story time.
Please read to me. Read me a story, please.
The Education Channel happily brings you Storytime, a favorite story read to you right here on TV. Storytime is a daily read-aloud show designed just for you. Storytime is made possible by Collier County Public Schools, Barnes & Noble Booksellers, and Naples Daily News.
On this show, our featured story is The Old Woman Who Named Things, written by Cynthia Rylant and illustrated by Catherine Brown. Our guest reader, Cindy Anderson, former theater director.
So are you ready, boys and girls?
We're ready.
Then it's story time. And here's our story.
We'll just get started then, and we're going to read The Old Woman Who Named Things. Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She named the old car she drove Betsy. She named the old chair she sat in Fred. She named the old bed she slept on Roxanne. And she named her old house Franklin. Every morning she would get out of Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from someone, but all she ever got was bills. The reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends. This worried her. She didn't like the idea of being a lonely old woman without any friends, without anyone whom she could call by name. So she began to name things, but she named only those things she knew she could never outlive. Her car Betsy had more get up and go than anything around. Her chair Fred had never sagged a day in his life. Not one creak or moan had she ever heard out of her old bed, Roxanne. The old woman never worried about outliving any of them, and her days were happy. One day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off Betsy, telling her that Franklin wouldn't want to be seen with a car that didn't keep its bumpers a little cleaner, a shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. The old woman had not named the gate because two of its hinges had rusted off, and she could tell the gate wasn't long for this world. The shy young puppy wagged its tail. It looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and watched the puppy for a while. She said. Then she walked into Franklin, got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator, and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. She told it that Betsy always made puppies sick, and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne wasn't wide enough for a puppy and an old woman to fit on, and besides all this, Franklin couldn't tolerate dog hair. So the puppy went away. But the next day, the puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred reading a book on everlasting flowers when she saw the puppy through her window. "Go home," she called to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when it saw her. "Go home," she called again, but the puppy just kept wagging. The old woman noticed that it still looked a little hungry, so she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits. Then she told it to go home. The puppy went away. That night, as the old woman plumped up the pillows on Roxanne, she thought about the puppy. It was a very nice puppy, she thought. It was a very pretty puppy, she thought. But it couldn't stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name, and it could never last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne. She might outlive it, and she didn't want to risk that. She didn't want to outlive any more friends. She would just keep telling it to go home. Every day, the shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. Every day, she fed it and told it to go home. Always it went away, and always it came back the next day. This went on for many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a dog. And it was still a dog with no name. In all this time, the old woman had gotten a new dresser that she had named Bill, a new wheelbarrow that she had named Francine, and a new concrete pig for a garden that she had named Bud. But the dog she faithfully fed at her gate every day still had no name. Since it had no name, the old woman didn't have to worry about outliving it, and she thought herself pretty clever in this. Then one day, the shy brown dog did not come to the old woman's home. She sat in Fred and watched the gate all day long, but the dog never came. The old woman felt sad. The next day again, the dog did not come. The old woman drove Betsy around town looking for the dog, but she did not find it. The old woman felt even sadder. The following day, when still the dog did not come, the old woman knew she just had to do something. So she picked up the telephone and called the dog catcher. "Have you caught any shy brown dogs?" the old woman asked the dog catcher. "We've got a whole kettle full of shy brown dogs, ma'am," said the dog catcher. "Was yours wearing a collar with a name on it?" "No," said the old woman sadly, and she hung up the telephone. The old woman sat and thought about the shy brown dog who had no collar with a name. Wherever it was, no one would know that it was supposed to come to the old woman's gate every day, that she was supposed to feed it and tell it to go home every day, that things were always supposed to be this way. The shy brown dog had no collar and no name, and no one would ever be able to know these things about it. The old woman made a decision. She locked up Franklin and drove Betsy to the dog catcher's kennel. She said to the dog catcher, "I've come to find my dog." He asked her what color it was. "It's brown," she said. He asked her how old it was. "About a year old," she said. Then he asked her what its name was. The old woman thought a moment. She thought of all the old dear friends with names whom she had outlived. She saw their smiling faces, remembered their lovely names, and thought how lucky she had been to have known these friends. She thought what a lucky old woman she was. "My dog's name is Lucky," she told the dog catcher. He led her to a big yard full of white dogs and black dogs and brown dogs. The old woman looked and looked and looked, and finally she saw her own shy brown dog sitting beside a gate. The dog was looking at Betsy parked in the driveway. The old woman called out, "Here, Lucky!" And at the sound of her voice, the shy brown dog came running. From that day on, Lucky lived with the old woman, and he always came when his name was called. It turned out that Betsy didn't make all dogs sick, and Fred was happy to allow a dog to sit on him. Franklin didn't really mind a little dog hair. And every night, Roxanne was sure to make herself plenty wide enough for a shy, brown, lucky dog and the old woman who named him.
You're enjoying Storytime, the TV reading show coming your way on the Education Channel.
Our next story is Molly the Brave and Me, written by Jane O'Connor and illustrated by Sheila Hamanica. Our guest reader, Elaine Schutzman, community member.
Molly has guts. She has more guts than anybody in the second grade. She could stand at the top of the monkey bars on one foot. She doesn't mind it when Nikki hides dead water bugs in her desk. And if big kids pick on her, Molly tells them to get lost. Molly is so brave, I wish I was like her. Today on the lunch line, Molly said to me, "Beth, can you come to our house in the country this weekend? It is lots of fun there." Wow, I guess Molly really likes me. That made me feel good. But I've never been away from home. What if I get homesick? What if they eat stuff I don't like? What if there are lots of wild animals? I wasn't sure I wanted to go. I sat at a table with Molly. I said, "Gee, Molly, it sounds neat, only I don't know if my parents will say yes." Well, that night, Molly's mom called my mom. My mom said yes. So how could I say no? It was all set. Molly's parents were going to pick me up on Saturday morning. Friday night, I packed my stuff. Later, my mom tucked me in bed. "I'm scared I'll miss you," I said. "I bet I'll cry all the time. Then Molly will think I'm a big baby, and she won't like me anymore." My mom hugged me. "Oh, you'll have lots of fun, and Molly will understand if you're a little homesick." Then my mom kissed me 2 times. One kiss is for tonight, and the other is for tomorrow night, when you'll be at Molly's house. Molly's parents came early the next morning. I was scared, but I was excited too. Most of all, I didn't want to look like a wimp around Molly, so I waved goodbye to my parents and hopped in the back seat. Molly's dog sat between us. "This is Butch," said Molly. Right away, Butch started licking me. I'm kind of scared of big dogs, but did I show it? No way. I acted like I loved getting dog spit all over my face. By noon, we got to Molly's house. It sat all alone at the top of a big hill. There was once a farm, Molly's mom told me. It's 150 years old. I like new houses. They haven't had time to get any ghosts. But I didn't say that to Molly's mom. Right after lunch, we went berry picking. That sounded like fun. Then I saw all the beetles on the bushes. I didn't want to touch them, but Molly just swatted them away, so I gave it a try too. Hey, this is fun, I said. I've never picked food before. We ate lots and lots of berries. Red juice got all over my face and hands. I pretended it was blood and I was a vampire. I chased Molly all around. You know what, I told her? I'm really glad that I came to your house. Later, we went looking for wildflowers. That sounded nice and safe to me. We walked all the way down to a stream. A big log lay across the stream. Molly ran right across it. Boy, what guts. Butch ran across too. I stared at the log. Aren't there any wildflowers on this side, I asked? And Molly shook her head. The best ones are over here. Come on, Beth, don't be scared. Just walk across. It's easy. Okay, I told myself. Quit acting like a wimp. I started taking tiny steps across the log. Near the end, I slipped. Woof! Down I went. Are you all right, Molly asked? I nodded, but my backside really hurt. We picked flowers for a while, and when we left, I crawled across the log. Molly didn't tease me. Still, I knew I looked like a jerk. On the way back to the house, Butch saw a rabbit and chased it into a field of corn. Dumb dog, said Molly. He'll never catch that rabbit. We better go and find him. Oh, rats, I thought. But I went in after Molly. We followed the sound of Butch's barks. Boy, was that field big. The corn was way over our heads, and it seemed to go on for miles. At last, we spotted Butch. Molly ran and hugged him. Then she pulled me by the arm. This place is creepy, Molly said. Let's get out of here. That was fine with me, but it was not so easy getting out. All the corn looked the same. It was hot and hard to see. Bugs kept flying in our faces. It felt like we were walking around and around in circles. Can't Butch help us find the way? I asked. Molly shook her head. Butch can't find his own doghouse. Then Molly started blinking hard, and her nose got all runny. Beth, she said, we're really stuck in here. I'm scared. Molly, scared? I couldn't believe it. I held her hand. Don't be scared, I told her, even though I was scared too. We'll get out of here. Then I got an idea. Come on, I told Molly. I started to walk down the space between the two rows of corn. I didn't make any turns. I stayed in a straight line. Pretend this is a long street, I said. Sooner or later, we have to come to the end of it. And at last we did. Molly and I hugged each other and jumped up and down. Woof, woof, said Butch. Hot stuff, said Molly. You got us out. When we got back to Molly's house, her mother said, where have you girls been? It's almost time for dinner. Molly told her parents about following Butch into the corn. Then she put her arm around me. I was scared stiff, Molly told them. But Beth wasn't scared at all. Boy, does she have guts. Guts? Me? I couldn't believe my ears. Dinner was great. We cooked hot dogs on sticks over a fire. And there was plenty of corn on the cob. Oh no, not corn. Molly and I shouted together, but we each ate 3 ears anyway. Right before bed, I did get a little homesick. Molly's mom gave me a big hug. That helped. Then Molly told me I was her best friend. We locked pinkies on it. That helped too. Maybe Molly was right. Maybe I really am a kid with guts.
Thanks for joining us for Storytime, the TV Read Aloud show, here on the Education Channel.
Our next story is The Mysterious Tadpole. New illustrations and text by Stephen Kellogg. Our guest reader, Jean Martinez, community member.
Our next story is The Mysterious Tadpole. "Greetings, nephew," cried Lewis's Uncle McAllister. "I've brought a wee bit of Scotland for your birthday." "Thanks," said Lewis. "Look, Mom and Dad, it's a tadpole." Lewis named him Alphonse and promised to take good care of him. Lewis took Alphonse to school for show and tell. "Class, here we have a splendid example of a tadpole," exclaimed Miss Shelbert. "Let's ask Lewis to bring it back every week so we can watch it become a frog." Miss Shelbert was amazed to see how quickly Alphonse grew. "Maybe it's because he only eats cheeseburgers," said Lewis. When Alphonse became too big for his jar, Lewis moved him to the kitchen sink. "He's the perfect pet," said Lewis. Lewis and Alphonse loved to play games. "Be careful, Lewis," said his mother. "The living room is not a soccer field. Something is going to get broken." And she was right. That same day, the soccer ball slammed into Aunt Tabitha's antique lamp. "This tadpole's out of control," said Lewis's mother. "Something must be done." "It won't happen again," promised Lewis. "I'll take Alphonse to obedience school." The only animals at the obedience school were dogs. Some of their owners stared at Alphonse suspiciously. "Pretend you're a dog," whispered Lewis. Alphonse tried to bark, but it sounded like a burp. "Hold on a minute," said the trainer. "What kind of dog is this?" "He's a hairless, spotted water spaniel from Scotland," explained Lewis. Alphonse quickly learned to sit, stay, and retrieve. He graduated at the top of his class. "My parents will be very pleased," said Lewis. But Lewis's parents were not pleased when Alphonse outgrew the sink and had to be moved to the bathtub. "This shower is too crowded," complained Lewis's father. "This bathroom is a mess," moaned Lewis's mother. At least Lewis's classmates enjoyed Alphonse, who was still making weekly visits. "Wow, show and tell is more fun than recess," they yelled. But one day Miss Shelbert decided Alphonse was not turning into an ordinary frog. She asked Lewis to stop bringing him to school. By the time summer vacation arrived, Alphonse had outgrown the bathtub. "We could buy the parking lot next door and build him a swimming pool," suggested Lewis. "Be sensible," declared Lewis's parents. "Swimming pools are expensive. We're sorry, Lewis, but this situation has become impossible. Tomorrow you will have to take your tadpole to the zoo." "But I can't put my friend in a cage," cried Lewis. That night, Lewis was very sad, until he remembered that the gym in the nearby high school had a swimming pool. Lewis hid Alphonse under a carpet and smuggled him inside. "Nobody uses this place during the summer," whispered Lewis. "You'll be safe here." After making sure that Alphonse felt at home, Lewis said goodbye. "I'll be back tomorrow with a big pile of cheeseburgers," he promised. Lewis came every afternoon to play with Alphonse. In the mornings, he earned the money for the cheeseburgers by delivering newspapers. The training continued as well. Lewis would say, "Alphonse, retrieve," and Alphonse would succeed every time. As summer vacation passed, Lewis became more and more worried about what would happen to Alphonse when the high school kids returned. After his first day of class, Lewis ran to the high school and found the gym bustling with activity. The swim team was heading to the pool. "Stop!" cried Lewis. "On your mark," bellowed the coach. "Get set." "Excuse me, sir," said Lewis. "Go," roared the coach. Alphonse rose to the surface to welcome the swimmers. "It's a submarine from another planet," shrieked the coach. "Call the police, call the Navy." "No, it's only a tadpole," said Lewis. "He's my pet." The coach was upset and confused. "You have until tomorrow," he cried, to get that creature out of the pool. Lewis telephoned his friend Miss Severs, the librarian, and asked for her help. "I'll be right there," she said. Miss Severs rushed to meet Lewis at the high school. When she saw Alphonse, she was so startled that she dropped her purse into the water. "Retrieve," said Lewis, and Alphonse did. "Where did this astounding animal come from?" cried Miss Severs. "He was a birthday gift from my uncle," Lewis replied. Miss Severs telephoned Uncle McAllister. "Oh, the wee tadpole," he said. "Why, he came from the lake nearby. It's the one folks call Loch Ness." "Brace yourself, Lewis," Miss Severs said. "I believe your uncle found the Loch Ness monster." "I don't care," cried Lewis. "Alphonse is my friend, and I love him." He pleaded with Miss Severs to help him raise enough money to buy the parking lot so he could build a swimming pool for Alphonse. Suddenly, Miss Severs had an idea. "Long ago, a pirate ship sank in the harbor," she said. "No one has ever been able to find it or its treasure chest, but perhaps we can." The next morning, they drove to the harbor and rented a boat. "This is a treasure chest," cried Lewis. "Retrieve," and he showed Lewis a picture of what a treasure chest was. Alphonse disappeared under the water and returned with the chest. It was filled with gold and jewels. "Let's buy the parking lot and get to work," cried Miss Severs. Lewis's parents were shocked to see a construction crew in the parking lot. "Lewis," they cried, "what in the world is going on?" "Alphonse found a pirate treasure ship," explained Lewis, "and we used part of our gold to buy you this present." Lewis's parents were shocked again. "Tickets for a vacation cruise to Hawaii," they gasped. "And," said Lewis, "you don't have to worry about us because Granny has agreed to babysit." They hugged Lewis, they kissed Alphonse. "How soon can we leave?" they cried. "Immediately," said Lewis. By the time Lewis's parents returned, the swimming pool was being enjoyed by everyone in the city. A week later, Lewis said, "Alphonse, tomorrow is my birthday, which means you've been my best friend for a whole year." The next day, Uncle McAllister arrived for the party. "Greetings, Lewis, my lad," he exclaimed. "I've come with a curious stone from the hills of Scotland. Happy birthday." "Wow," said Lewis, "thanks." Suddenly, the stone began to tremble and crack, and out pops a big bird. And the next thing you know, the big bird carries Alphonse away, probably back to Scotland.
It's story time every day on the Education Channel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to Collier County Public Schools, Barnes & Noble Bookseller, and Naples Daily News for making Storytime possible. Storytime is a production of the school district's Communications and Community Engagement Department and the Education Channel, your window to education.